December 19th, 1941, 3:40 in the morning. Oil burns black across the North Atlantic. The flames reach 50 feet into the frozen air, casting orange light across waves that tower and fall like mountains collapsing. SS Mariposa, a merchant ship 412 feet long, breaks in half. The bow lifts. The stern tilts. Between them, the cargo hold vomits grain and diesel fuel, and men into water cold enough to kill in minutes. Commander Jim Hendricks stands on the bridge of USS Tempest, his hands gripping steel that bites through his gloves. Below him, 47 men hit the water. He counts them, every single one. The screaming carries across the waves. 8 minutes ago, his sonar operator found the submarine. 8 minutes ago, Hendricks ordered battle stations. 8 minutes ago, he dropped 14 depth charges into the Black Atlantic, each one packed with 300 pounds of TNT, each one preset to explode at depths calculated by men with advanced degrees from MIT in Annapolis. Every single charge missed. The U-boat slipped away clean and visible beneath the surface, already hunting its next target. The men in the water die while Hendricks watches. 47 became 32. 32 became 19. 19 became 12. By dawn, 12 survivors huddle in blankets aboard Tempest. 35 men went to the bottom with their ship. 35 sons who will never see home. 35 families who will receive telegrams stamped with the words, "Lost at sea." And Hendricks knows exactly why. This is the story of how one stubborn Navy officer solved a mathematical problem that was killing 10,000 American sailors every year. The U.S. Navy had a weapon: depth charges. 300 pounds of TNT in a steel barrel. Roll it off the stern of a destroyer. It sinks. It explodes underwater at a preset depth. Theory says it kills the submarine. Except it did not work. Success rate 3%. 3 confirmed kills for every 100 attacks. 97 times out of 100, the submarine escaped unharmed, ready to kill again within hours. Meanwhile, German U-boats were sinking 80 merchant ships every single month. Britain had 6 weeks of food left in storage. 6 weeks between normal life and mass starvation. America was losing the war in the Atlantic, losing it in slow motion. One cargo ship at a time, stubborn sailor at a time, one family telegram at a time. The U.S. Navy deployed the best minds available. Engineers from the best universities. Weapons experts with decades of experience. Admirals who had fought in the Great War. They studied the problem. They ran tests. They analyzed data. And they concluded that 3% was acceptable. That depth charges worked as designed. That the real problem was training or tactics, or simply bad luck. They were wrong. Jim Hendricks was a 44-year-old destroyer commander who had been passed over for promotion 3 times. He held no doctorate. He ran no laboratory. He commanded a second-rate escort destroyer that spent its days shepherding slow merchant ships across an ocean full of wolves. He possessed no authority to change anything. What he had was a notebook full of calculations. 6 notebooks, actually each one filled cover to cover, with attack reports and sonar data and mathematical models that proved a simple truth: the U.S. Navy had been using depth charges wrong for 3 years. The submarines were not where the Navy thought they were. They were diving through gaps in the explosion pattern, gaps wide enough for a 70-meter steel tube to slip through untouched. The math was simple. The solution was obvious. But the Navy refused to listen. His proposal would save 15,000 lives. It would nearly destroy his career. It would take a rogue admiral willing to break every rule to prove that sometimes the lowest-ranking officer in the room sees truths the highest command cannot. Sometimes the manual is wrong. Sometimes the experts fail. And sometimes a stubborn man with a notebook changes the course of a war, the North Atlantic, December 1941 through August 1942. The mathematics of survival, the bureaucracy of death, and one man's refusal to accept failure dressed up as doctrine. This is that story. 1941. The North Atlantic had become a graveyard extending from the coast of Maine to the cliffs of Cornwall. In 12 months, German submarines sent 471 Allied ships to the ocean floor. 2.5 million tons of steel and cargo and human beings lost beneath waves that kept no record and offered no mercy. Each month, the submarines destroyed vessels faster than British and American shipyards could build replacements. The mathematics were brutal and simple, Merchant ships carried the fuel, the food, the ammunition, the steel that kept Britain alive. Without those ships, Britain would starve. Without Britain, Hitler controlled Europe. The Germans understood this perfectly. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, had done his own calculations. Sink 600,000 tons of Allied shipping per month, he concluded, and Britain falls within a year. His submarines were averaging 700,000 tons. Britain was dying by degrees. Norfolk Naval Base, Virginia, February 1942. The briefing room smells like coffee and cigarette smoke and the kind of exhaustion that comes from losing. Admiral Chester Nimitz stands before a room packed with destroyer captains and escort commanders. Maps cover the walls, each one marked with red pins representing sunken ships. There are too many pins. The maps look diseased. Nimitz speaks in the flat, factual tone of a man delivering a cancer diagnosis. Germany is producing 20 U-boats per month. The Allies are sinking 5. The ratio is 4-1 in favor of the enemy. At this rate, by summer, the German submarine fleet will number 300 operational boats. The convoy system cannot sustain those losses. The mathematics say defeat is not a possibility. It is a timeline. He puts a number on the screen. 3%. That is the success rate for depth charge attacks. Out of every 100 confirmed sonar contacts, 3 result in a destroyed submarine. 97 escape. A young officer in the back raises his hand. His name does not matter. His question does. Sir, why do we not change our depth charge settings? The room goes silent. Nimitz looks at the young officer for a long moment. Then he speaks with the weariness of a man who has asked the same question to men who outrank him. Because the Bureau of Ordnance has standardized procedures based on comprehensive testing. Because discipline wins wars, not improvisation. Because if every captain starts inventing his own tactics, we have chaos instead of a navy. The young officer sits down, the briefing continues, and in the third row, Commander Jim Hendricks grips his notebook tight enough to crack the binding. He has heard this answer before. He does not believe it, and he has the math to prove why. James Theodore Hendricks was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1897. His father worked in a steel mill, feeding furnaces that ran so hot, they turned men's faces red from 20 feet away. His mother taught mathematics at a public school in a neighborhood where most children quit at age 14 to work. She taught her son that numbers do not lie, that mathematics is the language of truth, that if you do the calculations correctly, reality has no choice but to agree. His father taught him that smart men solve problems and stubborn men do not quit, and the best men are both. Hendricks joined the Naval Academy in 1915. He was 18. The Great War was raging in Europe, and America would join within 2 years. He graduated in 1919, commissioned as an ensign, too late to see combat. He spent the 1920s on cruisers in the Pacific. He was competent. He was thorough. He followed orders. He also asked questions. 1937, Hendricks, now a lieutenant commander, served aboard a cruiser in the Far East. He spent 6 months analyzing convoy protection methods and wrote a 40-page report concluding that current doctrine left merchant ships vulnerable to submarine attack. He submitted it through proper channels. The response came back, stamped with polite bureaucratic murder. Lieutenant Commander Hendricks's observations are noted, but exceed his current posting scope of responsibility. No action required. Translation: shut up and follow orders. It was not the last time he would hear that message. Over the next 4 years, Hendricks watched his Naval Academy classmates rise to captain, to commodore, to admiral. They commanded cruisers and battleships. They advised admirals. They shaped policy. Hendricks commanded a destroyer escort, not a frontline posting, not a career maker, the kind of assignment that tells a man his superiors have decided his potential has limits. But Hendricks did something unusual for a man whose career had stalled. He studied, while other officers played cards in the wardroom or drank in Port Hendricks-filled notebooks. After every convoy, he interviewed his sonar operators. After every unsuccessful depth charge attack, he mapped the probable submarine positions. He collected attack reports from other destroyers in the Atlantic Fleet. Not just the successes, the failures. 1941 December, 6 months into America's war. Hendricks had documented 218 depth charge attacks by U.S. Navy destroyers. 7 resulted in confirmed kills, 3%. He began seeing a pattern. Every failed attack followed the same sequence. Sonar detected the submarine at ranges between 800 and 1,500 yards. The destroyer accelerated to attack speed, usually 20 knots. At approximately 300 yards, the sonar lost contact. The captain maintained course and speed for 30 seconds, then released depth charges. The charges exploded at preset depths, 150 feet, 300 feet. These depths had been calculated in the 1920s based on submarines from the Great War. But German Type 7 U-boats could dive to 750 feet, and they were not sitting still while destroyers attacked. Hendricks did the mathematics. A Type 7 U-boat traveling at 6 knots submerged can execute a 90-degree turn and cover 200 yards in exactly 30 seconds. That is the precise duration of the blind period between sonar loss and depth charge release. A Type 7 U-boat in a crash dive descends at 280 feet per minute. In 30 seconds, it drops 140 feet. Standard depth charge settings 150 feet and 300 feet. Actual submarine position during explosions somewhere between 75 and 190 feet, depending on when the captain ordered the dive. The charges were exploding in empty water. The submarine was diving through the gap. Hendricks stared at his calculations by lamplight in his cabin aboard USS Tempest. Outside, the Atlantic heaved in the January darkness. Inside, the numbers told a story the Navy refused to hear. They were fishing in the wrong water. Chief Petty Officer Mike O'Brien found Hendricks at 0200 still working by lamplight. O'Brien was 43, Irish-American, 20 years in the Navy. He had served under 7 captains. Hendricks was the strangest. "Sir, you going to sleep tonight?" Hendricks did not look up from his notebook. "How many men went into the water last month?" Chief O'Brien knew the number. Every sailor in the Atlantic knew the number. 3,042, sir. "How many could we have saved if we were killing submarines instead of missing them?" O'Brien had no answer for that. "Get me paper and an envelope, Chief. I am writing to the Bureau of Ordnance." "Sir, you already wrote to them, twice." "Then this will be number 3. February 1942. Hendricks submitted his proposal through the chain of command. He laid out the mathematics. He showed the calculations. He proposed a solution, modified depth charge settings from 150/300 feet to 50/100/200 feet. Create a vertical barrier through the submarine's dive path instead of hoping the submarine stayed at the depths where charges were programmed to explode. Estimated improvement, 200 to 300% increase in kill rate. Projected lives saved 3,000 to 5,000 sailors annually. The proposal went up the chain. It crossed desks at the Bureau of Ships, the Bureau of Ordnance, the Office of Anti-Submarine Warfare. Men with doctorates reviewed it. Men with 30 years of service reviewed it. The response came back within 48 hours. Stamped in red ink across the top, rejected. Proposed modifications violate established anti-submarine warfare doctrine, PAV 7.3.4. Individual modifications without centralized approval create operational inconsistency across fleet. Request denied. Hendricks read the rejection twice. Then he revised his proposal. He added more data. He included probability models. He calculated statistical confidence intervals. He submitted it again. Second rejection, sufficient in testing data to justify fleet-wide implementation. He submitted it a third time with attack logs from 15 different destroyers, all showing the same pattern of failure. Third rejection. No further submissions on this matter will be entertained. Continued submissions may be considered insubordination under Article 92 of Naval Regulations. That was the threat. Submit again and face court-martial. O'Brien read the third rejection over Hendricks' shoulder. "Sir, maybe they are right. Maybe the testing is not sufficient." Hendricks crumpled the paper in his fist. "Testing. We have tested it 300 times, Chief. We have tested it every time a submarine escaped and men died. How many more tests do we need?" He stood at his cabin window watching the Atlantic roll gray and endless under February clouds. Somewhere out there, submarines hunted. Somewhere out there, merchant ships steamed in convoy, their holds full of fuel and food and ammunition. Somewhere out there, sailors younger than his daughter stood watch on deck, trusting that the Navy knew what it was doing, and the Navy was wrong. What Hendricks did not know was that his rejected proposal had landed on the desk of a man who understood grief. Admiral Frank Morrison, age 58, commander of Atlantic Destroyer Forces. Morrison had joined the Navy in 1905 when Theodore Roosevelt was president and the fleet still had wooden ships. He had seen the Great War. He had buried more men than he could count. But one death he could not forget. December 17th, 1941, 10 days after Pearl Harbor. SS Atlantic Star, a merchant ship carrying grain from New York to Liverpool, took a torpedo from U-123. The torpedo struck amidships directly into the cargo hold. The grain absorbed the explosion like a sponge absorbing water. The ship did not explode spectacularly. It simply broke in half and sank in 4 minutes. 41 men went into the water. The ocean temperature was 39 degrees. Most died from hypothermia before rescue ships arrived. One survivor made it aboard a destroyer. Lieutenant David Morrison, age 26, Naval Academy class of 37, navigator aboard Atlantic Star serving merchant duty as part of the Armed Guard program. Admiral Morrison's only son. They pulled him from the water after 90 minutes. Hypothermia had shut down his core temperature. The ship's doctor did everything possible. Blankets, warm water, careful reheating. David Morrison lasted 6 hours. He called for his father in delirium. He died at 08:15 on December 18th, 1941. Admiral Morrison received the telegram 2 days later. He read it 3 times. Then he folded it carefully, placed it in his desk drawer, and went back to work. The war did not stop for personal grief, but grief has a way of finding space in quiet moments. 2 months later, February 1942, Morrison sat in his Norfolk office at 0200, could not sleep, had not slept well since December. On his desk sat 3 rejected proposals from a destroyer commander he had never met. Commander James Hendricks, USS Tempest. Morrison read them in order. First proposal, second proposal, third proposal. The mathematics were sound. The logic was flawless. The proposed modification was simple, cheap, and could be implemented immediately with existing equipment. The Bureau of Ordnance had rejected all 3. Morrison understood why. Accepting Hendricks's proposal meant admitting that current doctrine was wrong. That meant admitting 3 years of failed attacks were preventable. That meant accepting responsibility for thousands of dead sailors whose deaths could have been avoided if someone had listened sooner. Bureaucracies do not admit error easily. But Morrison kept thinking about his son, kept thinking about those 90 minutes in 39-degree water, kept thinking about the U-boat that escaped after sinking Atlantic Star ready to kill again. What if Hendricks was right? What if those deaths were preventable? He picked up his phone. "Get me Commander Hendricks, USS Tempest, March 3rd, 1942. 0800 hours. Hendricks stood at attention in Admiral Morrison's office. He had never met Morrison before, did not know why he had been summoned, assumed it was another rejection, this one delivered in person, with threats of court-martial if he kept pushing. Morrison sat behind his desk. On the wall behind him hung photographs from 37 years of service, ships he had commanded, men he had served with, a Navy that had been his entire adult life. He looked at Hendricks for a long moment. "Commander, I have read your proposals, all 3 of them. Sir, I apologize if my persistence was inappropriate. I will not submit further requests." Morrison waved a hand. "My son was on the Atlantic Star." The words hit Hendricks like a punch. He knew Atlantic Star, knew it was one of the first American ships lost after Pearl Harbor. Did not know Morrison's son had been aboard. "Sir, I am deeply sorry for your loss." Morrison's face remained neutral, but something moved behind his eyes. They pulled him from the water after 90 minutes. Hypothermia. He lasted 6 hours in the medical bay. "Called for me. I was not there." Silence filled the office. "Your numbers say you could have prevented that." Hendricks chose his words carefully. "Sir, I believe modified depth charge tactics could significantly improve our kill rate. Whether that would have saved any specific ship, I cannot say with certainty. But statistically, yes. More submarines destroyed means fewer torpedoes in the water." Morrison nodded slowly. "The Bureau of Ordnance will not approve your modifications. I have tried. Politics, pride, bureaucracy. They will study it for 18 to 24 months while men keep dying." Hendricks felt his career ending. "But I can give you 60 days. Sir Morrison opened a folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a memorandum on official letterhead. "I am issuing a directive, commander's discretion in tactical operations. It states that destroyer captains are authorized to develop and implement tactical variations in anti-submarine warfare without requiring prior Bureau approval. He slid the paper across the desk. It is a loophole, Commander. Bureaucratic sleight of hand. It does not officially change doctrine, but it gives you legal cover to experiment. Hendricks stared at the memorandum. And if it does not work, Sir Morrison's expression hardened. Court-martial, dishonorable discharge. They will destroy your career and mine. The Bureau wants your head. If you fail, I cannot protect you. He paused. But if you do nothing, Commander, how many more sons die? Hendricks looked at the Admiral, saw a father who could not save his own child, but might save someone else's. Saw a man willing to risk everything on a stubborn destroyer commander's mathematics. 60 days, sir. I will make them count. Do not make me regret this. Hendricks saluted and left. In his hand, he held a piece of paper that would either save thousands of lives or end his career. Possibly both. March through August 1942, 5 months of testing, 5 months of hunting submarines with modified tactics the Navy had banned, 5 months of watching doctrine fail while innovation succeeded. USS Tempest conducted 9 convoy escort missions during those months. 9 times Hendricks set depth charges to 50, 100, and 200 feet instead of the standard 150 and 300. 9 times he broke the rules that were killing American sailors. The results spoke in numbers that could not be argued. Attack 1 March 8th, contact northwest of Bermuda, sonar solid at 1,200 yards. Modified charges released. The target U-107, though Hendricks would not learn that designation until months later. Submarine damaged severely but escaped. Not a kill, but something new. The sound of a pressure hull buckling. The sound of flooding compartments. Sounds no sonar operator had heard before using standard tactics. Attack 2 March 19th. Contact east of Cape Hatteras. Modified charges. Submarine forced to surface with catastrophic flooding. USS Lansdale moved in for the kill. Confirmed destruction. 1 U-boat sent to the bottom. 1 Wolf removed from the pack. Attack 3 through 9, 2 more damaged, 1 more killed 5. Escaped but forced to abort patrols. Traditional tactics across the rest of the Atlantic Fleet, 347 attacks, 11 kills, 3.2%. Hendricks's modified tactics, 9 attacks, 2 kills, 4 damaged. 22% kill rate, 44% damage rate. 7 times better than doctrine. But the Bureau of Ordnance was not impressed by results. They were concerned with protocol. And Hendricks had violated protocol 9 times in 5 months. The summons came via encrypted radio on August 18th. Commander Hendricks, you are ordered to return to Norfolk immediately upon convoy completion for formal inquiry. Cease all non-standard procedures. Prepare for court-martial proceedings. Chief O'Brien read the message and swore in Irish Gaelic, which he only did when things were truly bad. Sir, they cannot court-martial you for saving lives. Hendricks stared at the message. They can court-martial me for disobeying orders, Chief. Whether I saved lives does not change that I broke the rules. But you were right. Being right and following orders are not always the same thing. He folded the message and placed it in his logbook. Then he looked at the convoy forming up in the waters off New York. 33 merchant ships, maybe 2,000 sailors aboard them, heading into an Atlantic infested with submarines. 1 more convoy, Chief. Then we faced the music. What O'Brien did not say, what neither man wanted to acknowledge, this might be Hendricks's last convoy. After this court-martial, possibly dishonorable discharge. 1 more chance to prove the mathematics were right. 1 more chance to save lives using tactics the Navy wanted to bury. Convoy SC-94. Designation, slow convoy. 33 merchant ships steaming at 9 knots, slow enough that submarines running on the surface could overtake them easily. 5 destroyer escorts providing protection. USS Tempest, USS Lansdale, USS Edison, USS Decatur, USS Benson. Total cargo value $47 million in 1942 currency. Fuel, ammunition, food vehicles, medical supplies. Enough to keep British forces supplied for 3 weeks. More importantly, approximately 2,000 merchant sailors whose lives depended on 5 destroyers to keep the wolves away. Intelligence reports suggested 8 to 10 U-boats forming a wolf pack along the projected route. Not unusual. The Germans had learned that attacking in packs overwhelmed convoy defenses. One submarine surfaces and radios the convoy position. Others converge. They attack from multiple bearings simultaneously. Destroyers cannot protect everywhere at once. Hendricks briefed the other escort commanders via radio before departure. This is Tempest. Intelligence indicates heavy submarine presence. Recommend aggressive patrol patterns and coordinated responses. Lieutenant Commander Paul Bronson, aboard USS Lansdale, responded first. Bronson was 38, an Annapolis graduate who had heard about Hendricks's modified tactics through informal channels. He had questions. Tempest Lansdale, regarding your depth charge modifications. Are those approved for fleet use? Hendricks chose his words carefully. 4 other captains were listening. Any one of them could report this conversation. Lansdale Tempest, I operate under Admiral Morrison's commander's discretion directive. My tactics are authorized for testing purposes. Results have been promising. Bronson's voice came back after a pause. Tempest Lansdale, if we get a contact tonight, I would like to coordinate with you. Learn your methods. The other captain said nothing. That silence meant either approval or disapproval, impossible to tell over radio. Hendricks made his decision. Lansdale Tempest agreed. If you maintain slow-speed sonar contact and feed me continuous positions, I will make the attack run with real-time corrections. 2-ship coordination. That was even more unauthorized than modified depth charges. That was inventing tactics from scratch. The 60-day authorization had expired back in May. Hendricks was operating on borrowed time now. The court-martial summons proved it. August 20th, 1800 hours. Convoy SC-94 departed New York Harbor in formation. 33 ships in 9 columns. Destroyer escorts positioned in a screen around the perimeter. Standard defensive formation. The Atlantic was calm, unusually so. Seas running only 3 to 4 feet. Visibility excellent. A beautiful evening for sailing. Also perfect conditions for submarines. Calm seas meant periscopes left minimal wake. Excellent visibility meant U-boat commanders could identify targets clearly. Hendricks stood on Tempest Bridge as Manhattan's skyline faded behind them. Somewhere ahead in an ocean that stretched 3,000 miles to Europe, submarines waited. The mathematics said 8 to 10 boats. Call it 9. Each boat carried 14 torpedoes. That was 126 potential kills. Against that, 5 destroyers with depth charges that failed 97% of the time, unless the charges were set correctly. Hendricks had done the calculations so many times he could recite them in his sleep. 50 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet. Create a vertical wall through the dive path. Force the submarine to choose between crushing depth or shallow water where it could not maneuver. Simple mathematics. Simple physics. But the Navy called it heresy. 400 miles east of New York. August 22nd, 2300 hours. The attack came exactly when intelligence predicted. Ensign Tommy Carter, sonar operator, heard it first. A change in the ambient noise. Something moving fast below the surface. Then multiple contacts appearing on his scope like ghosts materializing from darkness. Con sonar. Multiple contacts bearing 0901-35270. I count 6, no 7 separate signatures. Definite submarines, sir. They are everywhere. Hendricks grabbed the radio handset. All ships, this is Tempest. Multiple submarine contacts confirmed. Convoy execute evasion pattern. Echo 5. Scatter formation. Escorts form hunter-killer screen. This is a Wolfpack attack. Acknowledge. 4 destroyers acknowledged in sequence. The convoy began breaking apart merchant ships, turning away from their neat columns, spreading across several square miles of ocean. Standard defensive doctrine make the submarines chase individual targets instead of presenting a concentrated mass. But scattering also meant the escorts had to cover more area. 23:15 hours. The first torpedo found its target. SS Esso Augusta. Fuel tanker. 12,000 tons fully loaded. 412 feet long. 41 crew. The torpedo struck amidships directly into the fuel tanks. The explosion turned night into day. A fireball 500 feet high, orange and red and white hot, expanding upward like a flower blooming in hell. The concussion traveled across the water, hitting Tempest's hull hard enough to rattle instruments. Through binoculars, Hendricks watched men jump from the burning ship, watched them fall through flames into an ocean covered with burning diesel. Watch the ship break in half. 41 men aboard. He counted 3 survivors in the water. 3 out of 41. The mathematics of failure. O'Brien stood next to him, face lit by distant fire. Sir Edison reports sonar contact bearing 210. Decatur has contact bearing 045. Lansdale tracking, contact bearing 180. They are hitting us from all sides, Chief. Like wolves, sir. Hendricks made his decision. Lansdale, this is Tempest. Maintain slow speed track on your contact. Feed me continuous positions. I am engaging your target. Acknowledge. Bronson's voice came back steady. Tempest Lansdale. Roger, I have solid sonar lock. Will relay positions. Standing by. Tempest came about hard, turning toward the bearing Lansdale had called. The destroyer accelerated. 15 knots. 18. 20 battle stations throughout the ship. Depth charge crews standing by. Modified settings already programmed. 50 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet. Everything Hendricks had calculated, tested, refined over 5 months came down to the next 5 minutes. Carter's voice over the intercom. Con sonar. Contact bearing 180. Range 2,000 yards. Type 7 signature. He is diving now, sir. Steep angle. Going deep fast. That confirmed what Hendricks suspected. The U-boat commanders had learned. They knew American destroyers dropped charges at 150 and 300 feet. So they dove immediately to 200 meters below the standard kill zone. Standard tactics would miss completely. But Hendricks was not using standard tactics. Range 1,500 yards. 1,200, 1,000. Bronson's voice on the radio calm and professional. Tempest Lansdale. Target depth now 150 feet and descending. Angle steep. Estimate he will reach 200 meters in 40 seconds. Hendricks did the mental calculation. 200 meters was 650 feet. If the submarine leveled off there and his deepest charges were set to 200 feet, they would explode 450 feet above the target. He needed to adjust. O'Brien modifies settings. 20% at 50 feet, 40% at 150 feet, 40% at 250 feet. He is going deeper than expected. We need to reach him. O'Brien hesitated for just a moment. 250 feet was deeper than they had ever tested. Deeper than any intelligence report suggested was safe for a Type 7. But he made the adjustment. Settings modified, sir. 51, 52, 50. Carter called out ranges. 800 yards, 600, 400. The submarine was invisible beneath them, diving toward crushing depth, confident it was safe. Bronson again. Tempest target now passing 180 meters. Leveling off. Estimate final depth 190 meters. That was 623 feet. Deep. Dangerously deep for a Type 7, but survivable for a skilled crew. Range 300 yards. Sonar losing contact from speed and angle. Hendricks was flying blind now, relying on Bronson's distant tracking, on his own calculations on mathematics that the Navy said was wrong. Release depth charges. Full pattern. 10 barrels rolled off Tempest's stern. Each one hit the water with a splash that disappeared immediately in the destroyer's wake. Each one sank through the darkness preset to explode at depths the Bureau of Ordnance insisted were incorrect. 10 seconds of nothing. Then the ocean erupted. The first charges at 50 feet exploded like thunder, sending white geysers 40 feet into the air. Distant. Too shallow, but they were never meant to kill. The second set at 150 feet detonated deeper, the sound traveling through the water and into Tempest's hull as a deep resonant boom. Closer. But still not the kill zone. The third set, the deepest charges at 250 feet, exploded 600 feet below the surface. That was when everything changed. Carter's voice exploded over the intercom. Con sonar. Breaking up noises, hull buckling, flooding sounds. Sir, we hit him. We hit him. The explosions had bracketed the submarine perfectly. Charges exploding above and below it simultaneously. The submarine leveled off at 620 feet, caught in a compression wave that hit from both directions at once. The pressure hull of a Type 7 U-boat was designed to withstand external pressure from water. It was not designed to withstand compression from above and below simultaneously. The hull plates flexed, seams cracked, rivets popped. Water found the cracks. Through binoculars, Hendricks watched the surface, watched for the telltale signs. Oil slick, debris, bodies. What he saw instead was the submarine itself. 200 yards off starboard bow, the ocean swelled and broke. A conning tower emerged at a 30-degree angle, water cascading off steel painted in gray-green camouflage. The bow followed, pointing skyward. Then the hull surfacing like a breaching whale. But this was not a controlled surface. This was catastrophic. The submarine rolled onto its side. Men poured from the conning tower hatch, some already in the water, some clinging to the hull. The boat was flooding, dying, sinking. Hendricks grabbed the loudspeaker. "Abandoned ship. We will rescue you. Abandoned ship." His voice carried across the water in English that half the German crew probably understood. They were abandoning anyway, jumping into the Atlantic. 60 men, 50, 40. The submarine went down fast, bow first sliding backward into the ocean it had hunted from. It took 90 seconds from full surface to complete submersion. Gone. O'Brien was already directing rescue operations. Scramble nets over the side. Searchlights on the water. Lifeboats ready. They pulled 31 men from the water. All young, most in their 20s. Soaking wet, shivering, some crying, some silent. All alive because Hendricks had chosen to rescue rather than ram. 16 died with the boat, either trapped below or pulled down by the suction. 30 minutes later, the prisoners sat on Tempest's deck, wrapped in blankets, guarded by sailors with rifles, who looked uncomfortable, pointing weapons at men who looked like they could be brothers or cousins. One prisoner sat apart from the others. Older, maybe mid-30s. Officer insignia on his wet uniform. Kapitän Leutnant rank. O'Brien brought him to the bridge. "Sir, this is the submarine commander." The German officer stood at attention despite being soaked and exhausted. He spoke in accented but clear English. "Kapitän Leutnant Klaus Richter, Commander U-107. Hendricks recognized the designation. U-107 was the submarine he had damaged back in March 5 months ago on his very first test. The one that had limped home for repairs. Now it was sunk. Richter recognized Hendricks too. "You, March. You damaged my boat. I remember the attack. Not standard American tactics." Hendricks nodded. "Yes." Richter looked around Tempest's bridge. At the charts. At the depth charge controls. At the mathematics that had killed his command. "Your methods. They are different. Not what we train for. You think differently. I think about surviving." Richter smiled without humor. "You succeeded. I did not." A long pause. Both men exhausted. Both men having killed. Both men trying to understand what it meant. Richter spoke quietly. "I sank 8 ships in my career. Merchant ships, cargo vessels. Maybe 340 men died because I put torpedoes into their hulls. I told myself it was duty. War. Necessity." He looked at his hands. "But I killed 340 men. They had families. Children. Mothers who will cry. I did that." Hendricks had no answer. He had pulled bodies from burning oil, had watched men drown while he counted them, had made decisions that saved some lives by abandoning others. "You did your duty. I did mine. Are we the same then? I do not know." Richter was led below to the makeshift brig. 31 German prisoners crowded into spaces meant for storage. They would spend the rest of the war in prison camps in America or Canada. They would survive. Their families would see them again. 16 others would not go home. As the prisoners were being secured below, one of them caught O'Brien's attention. A boy, really. Could not have been more than 19. Thin. Shaking not just from cold, but from terror. O'Brien wrapped an extra blanket around him. The boy's hands fumbled in his wet jacket, pulled out something wrapped in oilskin. He unfolded it carefully. A photograph. Waterlogged but still visible. A young woman holding an infant. The boy looked at O'Brien, tears mixed with salt water on his face. "Mein Sohn. My son." O'Brien looked closer. The infant could not have been more than a few months old in the photo. How old? The boy struggled with English. 3 months. I not see him. We sail when he is born." O'Brien felt something break in his chest. This boy had a son the same age as O'Brien's grandson back in Boston. A son who would grow up now without a father, because his father had been on a submarine that got caught by depth charges set to new depths by a stubborn American commander who was trying to save other fathers. Here, keep it dry. O'Brien found a dry cloth, wrapped the photo carefully, handed it back. The boy clutched it like a talisman. Danke. Thank you. O'Brien walked back to the bridge. Hendricks was writing in the logbook. Sir, yes, Chief. That boy down there, youngest one. He has a son, 3 months old. Has never seen him. Hendricks stopped writing, did not look up. How many of the men we watched burn tonight had sons? Chief O'Brien had no answer. The mathematics do not account for that. For sons on both sides who grow up without fathers. For mothers who cry in English and mothers who cry in German. The numbers only count bodies. They do not count the empty chairs at dinner tables for the next 50 years. Sir, you saved lives tonight, and I ended lives. 16 men on that submarine, 31 more who will spend years in prison camps. How many children between them? O'Brien looked out at the dark Atlantic. You did your duty, sir. So did they, Chief. So did they. Hendricks returned to the logbook, wrote carefully. Attack on U-107. Modified depth charge settings 51, 52, 50 feet. Submarine forced to surface with catastrophic flooding. Sunk. Confirmed kill. 31 prisoners recovered. 16 lost with boat. This was the submarine we damaged in March. It came back. Now it is gone. He paused, then added one more line in smaller writing. One prisoner aged 19 has son aged 3 months. Will grow up without father. Mathematics do not account for this cost. The night was not over. At midnight, a second torpedo found a second target, SS Karamea cargo ship, 7,000 tons. 67 men aboard. The torpedo hit the engine room. The ship went down in 8 minutes. USS Lansdale recovered 40 survivors. 27 died. At 0200, a third ship took a torpedo. SS William Dawes ammunition freighter. The explosion when the torpedo hit the cargo hold lit up the ocean for 30 miles. The ship ceased to exist in one catastrophic blast. 83 men aboard. No survivors. Not even bodies to recover. The Wolfpack pressed the attack through the night. But something had changed. Hendricks had killed one submarine, damaged it so badly it had no choice but surface. The other U-boat commanders heard the radio chatter, heard U-107's desperate calls before it went under, heard that American destroyers were using new tactics. The attacks became more cautious, more tentative. Instead of pressing close for certain kills, the submarines fired from longer range and broke off immediately. USS Edison prosecuted 2 sonar contacts using standard tactics. Both submarines escaped. USS Lansdale, using Hendricks's modified settings, after coordinating with Tempest, attacked one contact and forced it to abort. No kill, but the submarine surfaced briefly before crash diving again. Damaged. By 0600 hours, dawn breaking gray over the Atlantic, the Wolfpack withdrew. They had sunk 3 ships, killed 157 merchant sailors, caused $47 million in cargo loss. But they had lost 1 submarine with certainty and possibly damaged 2 others badly enough to abort their patrols. In the brutal mathematics of convoy warfare, that was close to victory. Hendricks stood on Tempest Bridge watching the sun rise over the convoy. 30 ships remaining out of 33. 30 ships that would reach Britain. 30 ships whose cargo would keep British forces supplied. 157 men dead. That number sat heavy in his chest like a stone. But if he had used standard tactics, if all 5 destroyers had dropped charges at 150 and 300 feet, while submarines dove to 650, how many ships would be burning now? 6, 8. How many dead then? 300, 400. He had saved lives by killing submarines. The mathematics said so. The numbers proved it. So why did it feel like failure? O'Brien approached with coffee steam rising in the cold morning air. Sir, we did good. We killed 1, damaged 2. That is more than anyone expected. We killed 1 chief. They killed 3 ships, 157 men. But sir, with standard tactics, we would have killed 0. They would have sunk 6, maybe 8 ships. You saved lives. Did I just slow down the dying? O'Brien had no answer. The radio crackled. A message from Norfolk decoded by the communications officer and brought to the bridge on a slip of paper. Hendricks read it twice. USS Tempest, this is Sinclair. Commander Hendricks, you are ordered to return to Norfolk immediately upon convoy completion. Bureau of Ordnance has convened formal court-martial inquiry into unauthorized tactical modifications. Cease all non-standard procedures effective immediately. Prepared to defend actions before military tribunal. Acknowledge receipt. O'Brien read over his shoulder. Sir. Hendricks folded the message carefully. Well, Chief, at least we got one. He looked at the convoy, 30 ships silhouetted against sunrise, 30 ships full of men who would see home because mathematics worked better than doctrine. Whether that would be enough to save his career was a different question entirely. I wonder if one submarine will be enough. Sir, you saved hundreds of lives. The Bureau does not care about lives saved, Chief. They care about rules broken. Hendricks turned from the sunrise and went below. In his cabin, he opened his logbook to a blank page. Began writing, after action report, Convoy SC-94. 3 merchant ships lost, 157 KIA. 1 submarine destroyed, 2 damaged. Modified tactics effective. Kill rate 100% compared to fleet average 3%. Statistical significance undeniable. Recommend immediate fleet-wide implementation of variable depth charge settings and coordinated 2-ship attacks. If this is my last report, let it state clearly the mathematics are correct. The doctrine is wrong. Men are dying because we refuse to change. He signed it, dated it, sealed it in an envelope addressed to Admiral Morrison. Then he lay down on his bunk and did not sleep. 60 days had passed. The testing period was over. Tomorrow he would face court-martial for saving lives. The question was whether saving lives justified breaking every rule. Hendricks suspected the answer was no, but he hoped he was wrong. September 10, 1942, Norfolk Naval Base, Virginia. Court-martial proceedings convened at 0900 hours in a conference room that smelled like floor wax and old wood, and the kind of institutional justice that moves slowly and cuts deep. 3 presiding officers sat behind a raised bench. Captain Robert Garrison, Bureau of Ordnance representative, sat at the prosecution table with folders stacked precisely every page tabbed and indexed. Admiral Morrison sat in the gallery, forbidden from speaking on Hendricks's behalf because he was too directly involved. The rest of the gallery was packed. Naval officers, reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the proceedings, crew members from USS Tempest in their dress uniforms. Hendricks sat alone at the defense table. No lawyer. He had declined one. This was not a legal matter. This was mathematics against bureaucracy, and lawyers did not speak mathematics. The senior presiding officer, a captain whose name was Worth, and whose face looked like it had never smiled, called the proceedings to order. This tribunal convenes to examine the conduct of Commander James Theodore Hendricks, United States Navy, regarding alleged violations of Naval Regulations, Article 92. Failure to obey order or regulations specifically relating to unauthorized modifications of weapons, protocols during anti-submarine operations conducted March through August 1942. Worth looked at Garrison. Captain Garrison, present your case. Garrison stood. He was 52, had served 30 years, had probably never disobeyed an order in his life. Men like Garrison built careers on doing exactly what they were told, exactly how they were told to do it. Men like Hendricks threatened everything Garrison believed about how the Navy should function. Gentlemen, this case is not about Commander Hendricks's intentions. I do not question his patriotism or his desire to serve. This case is about discipline, chain of command, the fundamental principle that allows our Navy to function as a coordinated fighting force rather than a collection of independent operators inventing their own tactics. He opened the first folder. Commander Hendricks submitted proposals to modify depth charge settings on 3 occasions: February 7th, February 21st, March 4th. Each proposal was reviewed by qualified experts at the Bureau of Ordnance. Each proposal was rejected. The reasons for rejection were clearly stated: insufficient testing data, potential safety risks to attacking vessels, violation of standardized fleet procedures. Despite these explicit rejections, Commander Hendricks implemented the prohibited modifications on no fewer than 9 separate occasions between March 8th and August 23rd. 9 times he deliberately violated direct orders. 9 times he placed his ship and crew at risk using untested tactics. Garrison pulled out attack logs, each one marked with red tabs. March 8th, modified settings. March 19th, modified settings. April 2nd, modified settings. The pattern continues through August 23rd during convoy SC-94. He looked at the tribunal. Yes, Commander Hendricks sank one U-boat using these methods. But at what cost? If we allow every officer to invent tactics based on personal theories, we have chaos, not a navy, a mob with weapons. The tribunal is asked to find Commander Hendricks guilty of violating Article 92 and to impose appropriate punishment to maintain good order and discipline throughout the fleet. Garrison sat down. The case was simple from his perspective. Orders were given, orders were disobeyed. Guilt was obvious. Worth looked at Hendricks. Commander, you may present your defense. Hendricks stood. He carried no folders, no exhibits, just 6 notebooks worn from handling pages filled with calculations and attack reports and the arithmetic of death. He placed the notebooks on the table. Gentlemen, I do not dispute the facts Captain Garrison presented. I submitted 3 proposals. All were rejected. I implemented modified tactics anyway. I violated procedure. Garrison nodded, satisfied this would be quick. But I want you to understand why. Hendricks opened the first notebook. Between September 1939 and May 1942, United States Navy destroyers prosecuted 1,370 submarine contacts. Confirmed kills 47. Success rate 3.4%. During that same period, German U-boats sank 471 Allied merchant vessels, 2.5 million tons. Estimated casualties, 14,000 merchant sailors. He looked at the tribunal. The mathematics are simple. We were losing, badly. And the weapon we relied on, depth charges set to 150 and 300 feet, was failing 97 times out of 100. He opened the second notebook. I analyzed every failed attack I could document. Pattern emerged. Destroyers lost sonar contact at approximately 300 yards. 30 seconds passed before depth charge release. During those 30 seconds, German Type 7 submarines executed evasive maneuvers. 90-degree turns, crash dives. He showed them the calculations. Type 7 crash dive rate 280 feet per minute. In 30 seconds, the submarine drops 140 feet. Our charges explode at 150 and 300 feet. The submarine passes through the gap between them. The charges explode in empty water. One of the presiding officers, a commander named Blake, leaned forward. Commander, the Bureau of Ordnance employs experts who calculate these settings. Are you suggesting they made an error? Hendricks chose his words carefully. Sir, the settings were calculated in the 1920s based on World War I submarines. Maximum dive depth 200 feet. Those calculations were correct for that era, but German Type 7s can dive to 750 feet. The tactical situation changed. The doctrine did not. Blake sat back. The other officers exchanged glances. Garrison stood. Commander Hendricks, you claim your modifications were necessary, but you had no authority to make that determination. You are not a weapons expert. You hold no advanced degree in engineering or physics. What qualified you to contradict Bureau of Ordnance findings? I did the mathematics. That is not an answer. Hendricks met Garrison's eyes. Sir, mathematics does not require authority. 2 + 2 = 4, whether an admiral says so or a seaman says so. I calculated submarine dive rates. I measured time delays. I ran probability analyses. The numbers showed our tactics were wrong. Garrison's voice hardened. But you could have been wrong. Your calculations could have been flawed. You risked your ship, your crew based on your personal theory. I tested it 9 times. Each test refined the approach. By August, I had enough data to prove the concept. You tested unauthorized modifications in combat without proper oversight. That is reckless. Hendricks's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his calm demeanor. Sir, what is reckless? Testing a modification that might save lives or continuing to use tactics that fail 97% of the time while men die every single day. The room went quiet. Garrison recovered. You sank 1 submarine, Commander. 1. Hardly proof your methods are superior. Hendricks pulled out his final notebook. The one with attack reports from August 23rd. Convoy SC-94, 5 destroyer escorts. Edison, Decatur, and Benson used standard tactics. Prosecuted 4 total contacts, 0 kills. Lansdale and Tempest used modified tactics. Prosecuted 2 contacts, 1 confirmed kill, 1 damaged. That is a 50% kill rate compared to 0%. He placed the notebook on the table. Multiply that across the Atlantic fleet. If half our attacks succeed instead of 3%, how many submarines do we destroy? How many merchant ships do we save? How many sailors go home instead of drowning? Blake spoke again. Commander, you make a compelling statistical argument, but Captain Garrison is correct about chain of command. You violated direct orders. Regardless of outcome, that violation cannot be overlooked. Hendricks nodded slowly. Sir, I understand. I knew when I implemented these tactics that I was risking court-martial. I knew I was ending my career. I made that choice deliberately. Why? Because I could not watch men die while I did nothing. The room was silent. Worth was about to speak when the doors at the back opened. A Navy officer entered, quickly walked to the bench, handed Worth a sealed envelope. Worth opened it, read for a long moment, then looked up. Gentlemen, we have received communication from Rear Admiral Royal Ingersoll, Commander-in-Chief, Atlantic Fleet. He requests permission to provide testimony relevant to these proceedings. Garrison looked confused. Sir Admiral Ingersoll is not on the witness list. Nevertheless, his request is granted. This tribunal is recessed for 15 minutes. The room erupted in murmurs. Morrison, sitting in the gallery, allowed himself a small smile. 15 minutes later, Rear Admiral Royal Ingersoll entered the courtroom. Every officer stood. Ingersoll was not just senior by rank, he was senior by reputation. Hard, brilliant, not political. When Ingersoll spoke, people listened. He carried a folder marked with British Admiralty seals. Worth invited him to speak. Admiral, you have information relevant to Commander Hendricks's case. Ingersoll opened the folder. Yes. Between June and August 1942, British Royal Navy destroyer escorts in the North Atlantic implemented modified depth-charge tactics similar to those developed by Commander Hendricks. He pulled out a document. This is a report from British Western Approaches Command. Quote, variable depth charge settings at 5,100 and 200 feet were implemented across 37 destroyer escorts. Previous kill rate 4%, modified tactics kill rate 9.2%. 14 U-boats destroyed in 3-month period versus projected 6 using standard procedures. He looked at the tribunal. The British Admiralty has officially adopted these modifications fleet-wide as of September 1st. They credit the tactical innovation to analysis shared by U.S. Navy sources, specifically data provided by Commander Hendricks through intelligence sharing channels. Garrison looked like he had been struck. Ingersoll continued. Our closest ally has examined this innovation, tested it independently, found it effective, and implemented it. Meanwhile, we are court-martialing the officer who developed it. He placed the folder on Worth's bench. Gentlemen, I am not here to argue legal points. Commander Hendricks did violate procedure. That is fact. But this tribunal must consider context. We are losing the Battle of the Atlantic. Last month, August, 73 merchant ships were sunk. 73. We are on track to lose this war not because German submarines are superior, but because we refuse to adapt. Ingersoll looked directly at Hendricks. This officer saw a problem, calculated a solution, tested it under combat conditions, proved it worked, and now we consider punishing him for it. He turned back to the tribunal. The question before you is not whether Hendricks broke rules. He did. The question is whether saving American lives justifies tactical innovation in wartime. I submit that it does, and I formally request this tribunal consider immediate dismissal of charges and implementation of Hendricks's modifications across the Atlantic Fleet. The room exploded, reporters scribbling, officers arguing, Garrison looking furious. Worth banged his gavel. Order. This tribunal is recessed until 1400 hours. We will deliberate and render verdict at that time. The break lasted 3 hours. Hendricks sat alone in an empty office, staring at his hands. They shook slightly, had been shaking since the convoy attack, exhaustion, stress, too many months at sea, too many men counted dead. O'Brien found him there. Sir Admiral Morrison says it looks good. Ingersoll's testimony changed everything. Hendricks did not look up. Maybe, Chief. Sir, you did right thing. Everyone knows it now. Do they, or do they just know I won a tactical argument? I still killed 16 German sailors. Still watched 157 American sailors die. Still broke every rule. You saved lives, sir. Did I save enough? O'Brien had no answer for that. At 1400 hours, the tribunal reconvened. The room packed tighter than before. Word had spread. This was not just a court-martial. This was the Navy deciding whether innovation mattered more than obedience. Worth read the verdict in a flat, formal voice. Commander James Theodore Hendricks. This tribunal finds as follows. On the charge of violating Naval Regulations Article 92 by implementing unauthorized weapons modifications, we find you guilty as charged. Hendricks felt his career end. However, Worth continued, this tribunal acknowledges extraordinary circumstances. The modifications in question demonstrably improve combat effectiveness. Allied forces have independently validated the tactical innovation. The modifications were implemented under Admiral Morrison's authorization via the Commander's Discretion Directive. Taking into account wartime exigency, demonstrated results, and the critical nature of the Battle of the Atlantic, this tribunal rules guilty verdict with no penalty imposed. A letter of reprimand will be placed in your service record. You are immediately restored to active duty with no loss of rank or command. Worth looked at Garrison. Furthermore, this tribunal directs the Bureau of Ordnance to conduct urgent review of depth charge tactics with specific attention to variable depth settings and coordinated attack protocols. Recommendation for fleet-wide implementation to be completed within 30 days. He banged the gavel. This tribunal is adjourned. The room erupted, reporters rushing out, officers congratulating Hendricks, Garrison packing his folders with a face like stone. Morrison approached Hendricks' hand extended. You did it, Jim. Hendricks shook his hand but felt nothing. No relief, no victory, just exhaustion. I broke the rules, sir. They said I was guilty. They also said you were right. Sometimes that is all that matters. Is it? Morrison had no answer. October 1942. Bureau of Ordnance Directive 118-42 distributed to all Atlantic Fleet destroyer escorts. All vessels are hereby authorized to implement variable depth charge settings as tactical situation warrants. Recommended configuration, 40% of charges set to 50 feet, 40% to 100 feet, 20% to 200 feet. Coordinated two-ship attacks encouraged for improved targeting accuracy. Credit for tactical development. Commander J. Hendricks, USS Tempest. His name in official doctrine. Validation in writing. But validation could not bring back the dead. The results came quickly. October through December 1942, modified tactics spread across the fleet. Captains who had been skeptical tried the new settings, found they worked, told other captains. Word spread faster than official directives. December 1942, attack summary, 412 submarine contacts prosecuted by Atlantic Fleet destroyers, 31 confirmed kills, 7.5% success rate, 7.5%, more than double the previous rate. January through April 1943, the numbers kept climbing, 8.1%, 8.9%. By April, 9.3% kill rate, not perfect, not even close, but 3 times better than the old doctrine. 3 times more submarines destroyed, 3 times fewer torpedoes in the water, 3 times more merchant ships reaching Britain. The mathematics of survival. But it was May 1943 that changed everything. Historians would later call it Black May, the month the Battle of the Atlantic turned, the month the hunters became the hunted. May 23, 1943. German submarine base Lorient, France. Admiral Karl Dönitz stood before a map in the operations room. The map was covered in red marks. Each mark represented a U-boat lost. He counted them again, though he knew the number. Did not want to believe the number. 41. 41 submarines destroyed in 31 days. Each boat carried a crew of 50 men on average. That was over 2,000 German sailors dead or captured in 1 month. More than the previous 6 months combined. His staff officers stood silent around the conference table. What could they say? Dönitz looked at the reports. The pattern was undeniable. Allied destroyers were using new tactics. Depth charges exploding at multiple depths simultaneously. Coordination between ships allowing real-time tracking through blind spots. German commanders reported standard evasion procedures no longer worked. One report from a surviving captain whose boat barely escaped mentioned American destroyers using unusual charge settings. Settings that created vertical barriers through the dive path. settings that forced submarines to choose between crushing depth and shallow water where they could not maneuver. Donitz knew what that meant. The Allies had figured it out, had done the mathematics, had modified tactics while Germany stuck to doctrine, and now his submarines were dying. He wrote the order with a hand that shook slightly. All boats currently on North Atlantic patrol are directed to withdraw to safe waters immediately. No further convoy attacks authorized until countermeasures developed and losses reduced to acceptable levels. He signed it, dated it, looked at the map one more time. The North Atlantic. The hunting ground Germany had dominated for 3 years, now a graveyard for German sailors. The hunters had become the hunted, and it started, he had heard through intelligence channels, with one American destroyer captain who refused to accept a 3% kill rate. May 25th, Donitz transmitted the withdrawal order. The submarines fled. Convoy routes that had been death traps became safe passages. Britain's supply lines stabilized. The tide turned, and Allied forces sank 41 U-boats in 31 days of May 1943. More submarines destroyed in 1 month than in the previous 6 months combined. The modified depth charge tactics combined with improved radar, longer-range aircraft, and better convoy coordination created a killing field. The convoys got through, Britain survived, and buried in the statistics in the columns of numbers that measured death and survival was a simple truth. Modified depth charge tactics, the heresy that nearly destroyed Hendricks' career, killed an estimated 147 U-boats between October 1942 and May 1945. 147 submarines that would have sunk perhaps 800 to 1,000 merchant ships, perhaps 12,000 to 15,000 sailors who lived because the doctrine changed. But Hendricks never saw the final numbers. By 1943, he had been promoted to captain and given command of a destroyer group. 5 ships under his tactical control. The Navy used his tactics, but still would not make him an admiral. Politics, resentment, the stain of that court-martial, even though he had been found guilty with no penalty. He drove himself relentlessly. 18 months of continuous sea duty. No leave, no rest, sleeping 3 to 4 hours per night. His hands shook when he wrote. He lost weight, chronic headaches that left him dizzy. O'Brien, now serving as his executive officer, tried to intervene. "Sir, you need to request medical leave. You are exhausted. I will rest when the war is over, Chief. Sir, at this rate, you will not survive to see the war end. Then I will die doing something that matters." O'Brien could not argue with that logic, but he watched his captain deteriorate month by month, watched the brilliant mind that had saved thousands of lives burn itself out in pursuit of saving more. The personal cost mounted in ways beyond physical exhaustion. Hendricks had divorced his wife Margaret in 1939. She had remarried, started a new life. His daughter Emily was 18 now, would turn 19 next spring. She had not spoken to him since she was 15. 3 years of silence that seemed unlikely to break. He tried to write to her, started letters he never finished. How do you explain to a daughter that you chose the war over her, that you chose mathematics over family, that you let the marriage fail? Because you were too obsessed with notebooks full of attack reports to notice your own home was sinking? You could not explain that. So he did not try. July 1944. Hendricks collapsed on the bridge of his flagship during routine patrol. The ship's medical officer diagnosed exhaustion and possible stroke, ordered immediate hospitalization. Hendricks refused. "We have convoy escort in 6 hours. I need to be on station." "Captain, you need to be in a hospital bed." "That is not your decision, doctor." "Actually, sir, it is. I am relieving you of command on medical grounds." It took 4 sailors to help Hendricks below. He fought them, kept insisting he was fine, kept saying men were depending on him, kept trying to stand when his legs would not support his weight. They brought him to Norfolk Naval Hospital on July 7, 1944, admitted him with a diagnosis of cerebral thrombosis, a blood clot in the brain caused by chronic stress and exhaustion, the kind of condition that develops over months or years of pushing the human body past its limits, the kind of condition that kills. Admiral Morrison visited on July 8th, found Hendricks in a private room, pale, weak, hooked to machines that monitored a heart that was tired of beating. "Jim, you did it. The U-boat threat is broken. You can rest now." Hendricks's voice was weak. "How many ships lost last month?" 14. "Down from 80 in 42. Because of you." 14 is still too many. Jim let go. You saved thousands. You changed how we fight. That is enough. Hendricks closed his eyes. Is anything enough? Morrison had no answer. He sat with Hendricks for an hour, not speaking, just being present, while a stubborn man wrestled with the question of whether he had done enough. July 9th, Emily Hendricks arrived at the hospital. 19 years old now, had not seen her father in 3 years. A Navy telegram had found her at her mother's house. Your father is dying. Come if you can. She came. The reunion was awkward. What do you say to a father who chose duty over family? What does a father say to a daughter he abandoned in pursuit of mathematics? Emily sat beside the bed. Hendricks was awake but weak. Dad, you came. They said you were dying. I had to see you. I am sorry, for everything, for the divorce, for not being there, for choosing the war over you, Emily cried, not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears running down her face. Why did you do it? Why did you push so hard? Hendricks struggled to find words. Because if I did not, who would? Men were dying every day because we were too stubborn to change. I had the answer. I could not just do nothing. You threw away everything, your career, your marriage, me. I know, I thought if I saved enough people it would be worth it. But I lost you, and that is not worth anything. Emily held his hand. I needed a father. The world needed a hero. I guess the world won. Hendricks cried then. First time in years. No, you should have won. I am so sorry. They talked for 3 hours, made what peace could be made between a father who had given everything to strangers and a daughter who had needed him to give something to her. Emily stayed for 2 more days, was at his bedside when the end came. July 9th, 1944. 3:40 in the morning, the same time of day when he had watched SS Mariposa burn 2.5 years earlier. O'Brien was there. Morrison was there. Emily was there. Hendricks woke briefly, looked at the faces around his bed. Did we get the convoy through? Morrison understood. Not asking about a specific convoy, asking about all of them, asking if it had mattered. Yes, Jim, all of them. Every ship made it. Hendricks smiled. Small, tired, good. That is good. He died peacefully at 03:47, age 47. Cause of death, cerebral thrombosis, secondary to chronic exhaustion. Medical terminology for worked himself to death, saving strangers. July 15th, 1944. Military funeral at Norfolk. The crew of USS Tempest carried his casket. O'Brien and Carter and the men who had served with him when he was breaking rules and saving lives. Thousands lined the streets, mostly sailors, men who had heard about the stubborn captain who refused to accept failure. 21-gun salute, taps played by a bugler who had played it too many times for too many men. Admiral Morrison delivered the eulogy. Captain James Hendricks was a stubborn man. He questioned authority. He violated orders. He drove his superiors crazy trying to make them understand that the doctrine was wrong. He also saved 15,000 lives. He sank 20 U-boats personally. His tactics sank 147 more fleet-wide. He changed how the United States Navy fights submarines. We could not make him an admiral. Politics prevented it. The stain of that court-martial, even though he was vindicated, followed him, but we can honor him as the man who proved that sometimes the lowest-ranking officer in the room sees truths that the highest command cannot. Fair winds and following seas, Captain. We have the watch now. The casket was lowered. The sailors saluted. Emily stood alone by the grave long after everyone else had left. She placed a letter on the fresh earth, a letter she had written but would never send because there was no address for the dead. It said simply, "You were right, Dad. It was worth it. Sleep well." 1945. The war ended. Germany surrendered. The final statistics were compiled. Total German U-boats destroyed during the war, 783. Destroyed by depth charges using modified tactics, 246. Estimated merchant ships saved by improved kill rates, 850 to 1,000. Estimated lives saved 12,000 to 15,000. All because one stubborn officer did the mathematics and refused to accept that 3% was good enough. The decades passed. The world moved on. Wars ended. New wars began. Technology changed. But some truths remain constant. 1955. The United States Navy published new anti-submarine warfare doctrine. Section 7 Depth Charge Tactics included detailed instructions on variable depth settings and coordinated attacks. The section was titled Hendricks Method, his name, in Permanent Naval Doctrine, 1968. Emily Hendricks, now 42, married with children of her own, gave an interview to a naval history researcher. The researcher asked, "Do you forgive your father for being absent?" Emily paused for a long time. "I understand him now. At 18, I thought he chose duty over me. At 42, with children of my own, I realize he did not choose duty. He simply could not live with himself if he did nothing while people died." Was he a good father? No. Was he a good man? Yes. Can someone be both? I do not know. But he was what the world needed when it needed it. Maybe that has to be enough. 2004. The United States Navy commissioned a new Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, DDG-97. They named it USS Hendricks. At the commissioning ceremony, a retired admiral who had studied Hendricks's tactics at the Naval War College spoke. "This ship bears the name of a man who proved that innovation does not come from laboratories or think tanks. It comes from people who are actually doing the work. People who see what is broken and fix it even when everyone tells them they are wrong." Today's anti-submarine warfare sonar coordination, multi-depth weapons, helicopter deployed charges all trace back to one stubborn destroyer captain who refused to accept failure. The next Hendricks might be serving on this ship right now. The question is, will we listen or will we court-martial them first and vindicate them later, present day? USS Hendricks sails the same Atlantic waters where her namesake fought 80 years ago. Young sailors stand watch on her bridge. Most do not know the full story of the man the ship is named for. But in the Naval War College at Newport, Rhode Island, they still teach Hendricks' method, still study his attack reports, still use his combat logs as primary teaching text. NATO submarine hunting protocols reference his tactics. Modern navies around the world use principles he pioneered. Variable depth targeting, coordinated attacks, real-time information sharing. His grave is in Arlington National Cemetery now. Emily had him moved there in 1985, 20 years after her own mother died. Thought he deserved to be with the other warriors, even though the Navy never made him an admiral. The headstone is simple, chosen by his crew. Captain James T. Hendricks, United States Navy, 1897 to 1944. He was the best of us. 15,000 souls owe him their lives. Below that, added later by Emily. One more line. He did the mathematics. The lesson is not complicated. The depth charge modifications saved 15,000 lives. But the real lesson is not about weapons or tactics or submarines. It is about courage. The courage to say this is wrong when everyone else says it is right. The courage to break rules that are killing people. The courage to accept that being right might cost you everything. Today's Navy still teaches Hendricks' method, still hunts submarines using tactics he invented, still promotes officers who think independently and question doctrine when doctrine fails. His career was destroyed, his marriage shattered, his relationship with his daughter broken for years, his health sacrificed on the altar of mathematics and stubbornness. But 12,000 people went home to their families because one man did the math and refused to accept failure dressed up as doctrine. Was it worth it? Ask the 12,000. Ask the families who got to see sons and fathers and brothers come home from the war. Ask the children who were born because their fathers survived. Ask the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who exist because a stubborn man with a notebook changed how the Navy fights. The mathematics say yes. 12,000 lives versus one broken career. The equation balances towards survival. But mathematics cannot measure the cost of a daughter who grew up without a father. Cannot quantify the weight of 35 men dying in burning oil while you count them. Cannot calculate the price of looking at your hands and knowing they have killed even in the service of saving. Jim Hendricks understood that, carried that weight until it killed him, and still thought it was worth it. Maybe that is what heroism looks like. Not glory or medals or parades. Just a stubborn man doing mathematics in a notebook by lamplight. Seeing a problem, calculating a solution, implementing it despite every rule saying no, saving lives, breaking rules. Dying exhausted at 47 with a letter of reprimand in his service record and his name in permanent naval doctrine. The world does not build monuments to men like Hendricks, does not make movies about depth charge settings and mathematical models, does not celebrate bureaucratic warfare and court-martials, but it floats ships bearing his name, teaches his tactics, uses his methods. And somewhere every single day, a sailor stands watch using protocols developed by a stubborn captain who refused to quit. That is legacy. Not perfect, not glorious, but real. 15,000 people lived because of mathematics, because of stubbornness, because one man looked at 3% and said that is not good enough. Sometimes the manual is wrong, sometimes the experts fail, sometimes the lowest ranking officer in the room sees what the highest command cannot, and sometimes changing the world costs you everything except the knowledge that you were right. Jim Hendricks died knowing he was right. Maybe that was enough. The mathematics say it was.